My name is Janet, and I am 58 years old. All my life, I believed the mark of a good mother was silent sacrifice. I raised Clara alone after my husband Robert passed away, thinking my quiet presence and unconditional love were enough. That all changed at her engagement party, when I found I was not seated with the adults, but in a corner of the room at the children's table. And that was only the first humiliation. Before I tell you what happened next, I am curious to know where you are listening from. Is it from a quiet space after a long day, much like the peace I used to find in my library? If this story about finding my own voice and self-respect resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to follow my journey. For 25 years, my life in Cedar Falls had a predictable, comforting rhythm. I was the head librarian at the town's public library, a position I cherished. My days were measured by the soft thud of book covers, closing the whisper of pages turning, and the familiar faces of patrons who had become like family. Mornings began with the scent of old paper and coffee from the pot I kept behind the circulation desk. I knew which teenagers were secretly reading romance novels behind their textbooks, which retired men were working their way through every Louis L'Amour western ever written, and which young mothers needed a quiet recommendation for a story that would hold their toddler's attention for 5 precious minutes. This was my kingdom, a world of quiet order and small, meaningful connections. Evenings were for my cat Hemingway, named for his grumpy demeanor and fondness for napping in sunbeams, and a well-worn armchair by the window where I would read until the light faded. It was a small life, some might say, but it was my life built carefully after the earthquake of Robert's death 7 years ago from a sudden heart attack. The silence he left behind was a cavern I had slowly, patiently filled with routine and service. I was content, or so I told myself during those long, still evenings. Clara's phone call came on a Tuesday evening, the kind of damp, grey Tuesday that seems to cling to the windows. Her voice was a burst of static energy so different from the hushed tones of my library. Mum Ethan proposed. It was perfect. The joy in her voice was genuine, and it warmed me from the inside out, melting a little of the perpetual chill I seemed to carry since Robert died. We talked for an hour, her words tumbling out about the ring, a square-cut diamond, very modern, and potential dates for next summer. My heart swelled. This was my little girl, the one who used to build elaborate forts out of sofa cushions, all grown up and in love. Tentatively, my mind already picturing the cozy chaos I offered sweetheart. That's wonderful news. Why don't you let me host a small engagement party here? I could make your father's pot roast the one he always loved. Invite a few of the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson still asks about you. The silence on the other end was brief but deafening. It was the sound of two worlds failing to connect. Oh, Mum. No, she said, her tone shifting to one of gentle correction, as if speaking to someone who didn't understand the fundamental rules of the universe. Everything has to be perfect. We're doing it in Chicago. All of Ethan's colleagues and our friends are here. It needs to be sophisticated. The word hung in the air between us, a subtle indictment of my simple, unsophisticated world in Cedar Falls of pot roast and neighbors who remembered her as a girl with scraped knees. I pushed down the pinch of rejection, the familiar ache of not being quite enough. Of course, darling. Whatever you want. And I meant it. I still believed then that my job was to smooth her path, not to complicate it with my own unmet needs. I immediately went online and transferred her $500 a contribution to the sophisticated party, a digital stand-in for my presence, hoping the gesture would stitch me into the fabric of her celebration from afar. The weeks leading up to the party were filled with a low-grade anxiety that hummed just beneath my skin. I went shopping in Des Moines, a rare and stressful event for me. The mall was a temple of noise and light. At a department store, a young saleswoman with overly bright eyes and a name tag that read, Chloe, descended upon me. She took in my practical shoes and sensible haircut and led me decisively away from the sale rack. She convinced me to buy a navy blue dress with a matching jacket, the fabric a stiff, unfamiliar twill. It was more expensive than anything I had bought in a decade. As I looked at myself in the three-way mirror, the woman staring back looked like a librarian playing dress-up as a corporate executive. The jacket's shoulders were too sharp. It's very chic, Chloe assured me, adjusting the collar with proprietary hands. I didn't feel chic. I felt like an impersonator of a city mother, a character in Clara's narrative, whose costume I hadn't quite mastered. My best friend B, a retired schoolteacher with the subtlety of a foghorn, came over for coffee the next day. She took one look at the dress hanging on my closet door and snorted into her mug. Going to a board meeting or a party, Janet? You look like you're about to fire someone. Don't let those city kids make you feel small. You remember who you are. I defended Clara, as always, smoothing the dress's sleeve. She just wants everything to be nice, B. There's nothing wrong with wanting things to be beautiful. B just shook her head, a lifetime of wisdom in her sigh. There's a difference between beautiful and brittle, honey. Just don't get your heart broke trying to fit into a world that doesn't see you. The journey itself felt like crossing into another country. The 4-hour train ride from the rolling, dormant fields of Iowa into the dense grey skyline of Chicago was a visual metaphor for the growing distance between my daughter's life and my own. I clutched my small suitcase, a gift for the happy couple, a delicate crystal vase from a local artist tucked safely inside my carry-on. Clara's apartment building in the West Loop was a sleek tower of glass and steel that reflected the cold winter sky. The lobby was vast, with a waterfall feature and a concierge who looked at my suitcase and me with polite disinterest. It smelled of expensive cleaner and faintly of some exotic woody perfume. When she opened the door to her apartment, she looked like a page from a magazine I might skim in the library waiting room. Flawless makeup, a chic black jumpsuit that seemed to be made of liquid. She gave me a quick, airy hug that didn't leave time for a proper squeeze. Mum, you're here. Just leave your bag there by the door. We're so behind on the centerpieces. And she was gone back into a whirlwind of activity, with a friend named Astrid, discussing peonies versus garden roses in tones of great seriousness. I stood in the elegant minimalist space, all clean lines and artfully placed sculptures that looked like angry metal birds, feeling like a bulky, old-fashioned piece of furniture that had been delivered to the wrong address. I perched on the edge of a white sofa, so pristine I was afraid to leave a dent. The party was held in a private room at a restaurant called the Gilded Elm. The name alone should have warned me. Everything was shades of white cream and gold. It was beautiful in a cold museum, like way that discouraged touch. People clustered in small, polished groups, holding delicate flutes of champagne that caught the light from minimalist chandeliers. The women wore little black dresses and severe, elegant heels. The men wore tailored blazers over open-collared shirts. My navy suit felt both too formal and not formal enough a costume from the wrong play. I recognized no one. Their laughter was a sharp, percussive sound. I saw Clara and Ethan across the room, the epicenter of the energy. Ethan was tall and handsome, with a confident smile that seemed permanently fixed in place, a feature as designed as the room. He had one hand possessively on the small of Clara's back as he leaned in to laugh at something a silver-haired man said. My daughter looked radiant, completely in her element, her laughter ringing out higher and brighter than the others. She belonged here in this gilded frame. The thought filled me with both pride and a lonely bewilderment. Then the gentle, authoritative clinking of a spoon on crystal. A smiling, immaculately dressed woman in a cream-sheath dress, whom I would later learn was Marissa the wedding planner, announced it was time to find our seats for dinner. A soft murmur of compliance rippled through the crowd. I looked around, hoping to catch Clara's eye, to be guided to a table, to have her link her arm in mine and say, "Mom's with me." People began to drift towards the round tables, draped in floor-length white linen, each a garden of white orchids and tapered candles. I started at the table nearest me, scanning the place cards, my eyes moving from one elegant cursive script to another: Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, Dr. and Ms. Reynolds, the Miller party. My name was nowhere. I moved to the next table, then the next. A cold, slick knot began to form in my stomach, tightening with each unfamiliar name. My palms grew damp against my beaded clutch. Then, almost against my will, my gaze drifted to the far corner of the room, near a discreet service door that swung intermittently, offering glimpses of stainless steel. There was a small round table. It was visibly lower than the others. It was decorated not with orchids and candles, but with 3 bright mylar balloons, silver, gold, and pink, tied to the centerpiece with curly ribbons. Scattered around it were little activity books with cartoon covers and a cup of blunt crayons. And there, propped against a small juice box, was a place card. In the same elegant, swirling script that graced the adult tables, it read Janet. Next to it were cards for Liam and Sophie. The noise of the room, the clinking, the laughter, the jazz piano faded into a dull, roaring rush in my ears. I could feel the blood draining from my face, could hear the heavy, slow thud of my own heartbeat. This had to be a mistake. A terrible, awkward, last-minute mistake. Perhaps Marissa had mixed me up with another guest. I stood frozen, a statue of humiliation clutching my small purse so tightly the beads imprinted on my palm. Clara floated by, adjusting a single stray orchid bloom on the head table. I reached out my hand, lightly touching her bare arm. She turned her beautiful smile, momentarily slipping into a flicker of impatience. "Yes, Mom." My voice, when it came, was a thin, reedy whisper. I had to clear my throat. "Clara, my seat. I think there's been a mix-up. It says I'm at that small table over there." I gestured weakly towards the corner, as if pointing out a stain. Her expression cleared into one of breezy, dismissive reassurance. "Oh, that no mix-up. We were just a few seats short at the main tables. Ethan has a lot of partners from the firm here, and it's really important for his networking." And I thought she said, leaning in, as if sharing a clever secret, "You're so good with kids. You can keep Liam and Sophie entertained. They're Ethan's cousin's kids, total terrors. It'll be fun. You'll be a lifesaver." She patted my arm, a quick patronizing tap. "Don't be such a worrier. Enjoy the party." And she was gone, swept back into the current of her perfect party, leaving me standing alone in the wake of her explanation. The walk to that table was the longest 20 paces of my life. I felt hyper-aware of my body, of the slight swish of my new dress, the click of my low heels on the polished concrete floor. I was certain every eye in the room was on me, a curious specimen being led to her proper diminutive place, though I'm sure most weren't even looking. My face burned with a humiliation so intense it felt like a physical sunburn. I pulled out the tiny, spindly chair and sank into it, my knees jutting up awkwardly, the tabletop hitting me mid-chest. Moments later, a harried-looking woman with a blonde ponytail and a strained smile led over 2 children, a boy in a stiff collared shirt and a girl in a frilly dress, both looking profoundly bored. "Janet. This is Liam and Sophie. Kids, this is Janet. She'll be sitting with you." The woman who I would learn was Ethan's cousin Melissa, gave me a look of profound relief and mouthed, "Thank you," before fleeing back to the adult world. Liam, who was about 8, eyed me with the blunt curiosity of childhood. "Are you in trouble?" he asked, poking his juice box with a straw. A laugh, brittle and unexpected, escaped me. "No, sweetie," I managed to say, my voice tight and strange to my own ears. I'm just sitting here. Sophie, who might have been 10, was more perceptive. She leaned in the ribbons in her hair, brushing the table, and whispered with the loud confidentiality of youth. I think the grown-up tables were full. My mum said it was last minute, and they had to squeeze you in with us. Her whisper was not quiet enough. It was the final, brutal confirmation. I was not a misplaced guest. I was an afterthought. A logistical problem solved with a children's table and a juice box. My role was not mother of the bride. It was babysitter. Convenient, unpaid help. The dinner was a surreal exercise in contrast. We were served chicken fingers, macaroni and cheese, and carrot sticks on colourful plastic plates, while the tantalising aroma of seared scallops, truffle risotto, and herb-crusted beef tenderloin wafted from the adult tables. I cut up Sophie's chicken-fetched extra ketchup packets from a passing waiter who gave me a sympathetic glance, and listened to Liam explain in exhaustive detail the lore and leveling system of a video game I would never see. I nodded and smiled a mechanical response. All the while my eyes kept drifting, pulled like a magnet to the main table where Clara held court. She threw her head back and laughed at something Ethan whispered in her ear, the very picture of effortless joy. She toasted with her friends, her smile wide and bright. She never once, not a single time, looked over at my corner. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter, hotter. The initial shock of hurt was being slowly, inexorably forged in the furnace of the evening into something harder and more durable, a deep, seething sense of injustice. This was wrong, and the ember of anger so long buried under layers of maternal duty and genteel accommodation began to glow with a persistent, warming heat. After the cake, a towering, abstract sculpture of white chocolate and berries was served and applauded at the main tables. We were presented with individual cupcakes, vanilla with lurid blue frosting. The sugar seemed to amp the children up before their parents finally retrieved them, offering me cursory thanks. I was left alone at the absurd little table, a monument to my irrelevance, surrounded by the detritus of a child's meal and the slowly deflating balloons. I was gathering the nerve to quietly slip away to find my coat and call a cab and retreat to the sterile quiet of my budget hotel room, when Clara appeared at my side like an apparition. "Mum, there you are." Her smile was wide, her eyes sparkling with a triumphant post-party glow. She linked her arm through mine with a show of affection that felt studied, a pose for an unseen audience. Her skin was cool against mine. "Come with me, let's get a breath of air." She guided me not towards the actual outside air, but to a slightly quieter alcove near the restrooms, a transitional space smelling of floral disinfectant and perfumed hand soap. The false intimacy of the space, with its muted lighting and potted fern, made my skin prickle with foreboding. "Wasn't it wonderful?" she gushed. Not waiting for an answer, her words tripping over each other in her excitement. "Everyone loved it. Marissa, that's the wedding planner. She's a genius, said the aesthetic was impeccable. Ethan's senior partner said it was the most elegant engagement party he'd been to in years." She was buzzing with a self-congratulatory energy high on social validation. Then the performance shifted. She took my hands in hers. Her touch felt cold, her fingers smooth and manicured against my work-worn skin. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial tone, the one she used as a teenager when she wanted to borrow the car. "Now, Mum, I have the most exciting news. Ethan and I have started planning the wedding. For real. Not just Pinterest boards." I felt a flicker of genuine maternal warmth, an instinct to share in the excitement, to be let into this new chapter. Maybe this was the moment we'd reconnect. "That's wonderful, honey. Have you thought about dates? Maybe something in the fall." "We have," she said, her grip tightening slightly, anchoring me to the conversation. "And we've found the venue. It's this incredible estate on Lake Michigan. All glass and stone right on the water. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a private beach for the ceremony. It's exclusive. They only do 15 weddings a year. It's perfect. Her words were coming faster now, a rehearsed sales pitch honed by her career in marketing. They have a platinum package. It includes everything, the catering by that chef who was on that culinary show, the florals from this amazing studio in New York, a 12-piece band, a fireworks display over the lake at midnight. It's the one, Mum. I can just see it. I've already seen it. It sounds breathtaking, I said, my voice faint. The description was so alien, so vast in its scale that I couldn't picture it. I could only feel a cold dread pooling in my stomach. I was already bracing for the impact. It is. She paused, looking me directly in the eyes with a practiced pleading expression she must have used to secure big accounts. It's also quite expensive. But it's my dream. Another pause, a masterful use of silence to let the implication of cost and desire hang heavily between us. You've always supported my dreams, Mum. You and Dad always said you wanted the best for me. She invoked Robert's name, and it felt like a physical blow, a twisting knife of emotional blackmail. He was no longer my gentle husband, but a ghost she was weaponizing. So, I was hoping, I was counting on you, really. Will you pay for the wedding? All of it. As your gift to us, as Dad's final gift to his little girl. The air left my lungs in a soft, involuntary gasp. The noises of the winding down party, the distant clinking of glasses being cleared, the echo of laughter from the lobby muffled, as if I'd been plunged underwater. I stared at her. My daughter. My only child. In her designer dress in this glittering restaurant that cost more per plate than my weekly grocery bill, she had just distilled a lifetime of my love, my grief, my solitude, my small sacrifices and quiet joys into a single financial transaction. The searing insult of the children's table, the plastic plate still imprinted on my psyche, fused with this new monumental presumption. The message was now horrifyingly clear. I wasn't her mother. I was a funding source, a line item in the platinum package, a human checkbook who could be conveniently seated out of the way until the bill came due. My mouth was desert dry. A lifetime of conditioning to be accommodating to avoid conflict, to make things easy for her to swallow my own needs, waged a frantic losing war against a rising tide of pure, unadulterated outrage. The warmth from the anger ember spread through my chest. I croaked the word, scraping my throat. Clara, that's a very big ask. A wedding like that. I need to think, to look at my finances. Her smile didn't vanish, but it stiffened, frozen at the edges. The warmth in her hazel eyes, so like Robert's, cooled by several degrees, turning calculating. She dropped my hands as if they had become unpleasant. Think, Mum. What's there to think about? You live so simply. I know you have Dad's life insurance, your pension from the library, your retirement account. You've been saving forever. She said it as if my lifelong frugality, born of necessity and caution, was a character flaw she was now entitled to cash in on. This is my future. Our future. Don't you want me to have the perfect start? The question was a weapon expertly deployed, designed to make any hesitation and feel like a betrayal of love itself. I felt dizzy, the room tilting slightly. I put a hand on the wall to steady myself. Of course I want you to be happy. But Clara, a wedding is one day. Your financial security. My financial security, that's for a lifetime. But nothing, she interrupted, her voice taking on a sharper, harder edge, the polished veneer cracking to reveal the steel beneath. This is important to me. To us. Please don't let me down. Don't be selfish about this. Selfish. The word hung in the disinfectant-scented air. After a lifetime of erasing myself for her, it was the cruelest cut of all. She leaned in and gave me a quick, dry kiss on the cheek, a period at the end of her sentence. Talk it over with your financial advisor or whatever. The dismissive, sarcastic quote marks around the words were audible. Let me know soon. The venue holds dates for only a week with a deposit. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked briskly back to the remains of her party to Ethan and the silver-haired partners, leaving me alone in the alcove, shattered into 1,000 quiet pieces. The train ride back to Cedar Falls that night was a journey through a dark tunnel of my own churning thoughts. I had a seat to myself, a small mercy. I stared at my reflection in the black window, a pale, ghostly outline superimposed over the fleeting, unseen landscape. I saw a stranger, a woman with a carefully styled helmet of grey hair, wearing a too expensive navy suit, her eyes in the glass hollow, and full of a deep, weary betrayal that seemed older than my 58 years. The rhythmic, hypnotic clacking of the tracks became a monotonous soundtrack to my grief. I didn't read. I didn't sleep. I just replayed the horrific tape of the evening frame by painful frame. But this time, my mind didn't stop at the party. It travelled years back, pulling memories from the archives of my life like painful, illuminating documents. I saw myself passing on a trip to Ireland with B the year after Robert died, because Clara needed a special summer art program in New York that wasn't covered by financial aid. I saw myself driving that old, reliable Toyota Camry for 14 years, the passenger window that never quite closed, so she could have a safer, newer car for college. I remembered the winter I kept the thermostat at 62 degrees and wore sweaters indoors to save on the heating bill so I could send her extra spending money for books. The countless small pleasures I had quietly denied myself, the new coat, the dinner at a nice restaurant, the hardcover book instead of waiting for the paperback, telling myself it was for her future, for her success. And what was her future now? A platinum package, fireworks over a private lake, a wedding where her own mother was deemed unfit for the adult table, worthy only of a plastic plate and a duty to mind children. The stark, ugly truth was this: in her climb toward this sophisticated life, she had stepped on me her ladder, and she hadn't even glanced down. When I finally stumbled into my silent, dark house just after 2 in the morning, the weight of this realization crashed down with physical force. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old books, usually so comforting, felt suffocating, the scent of a life lived too small. Hemingway mewed and wound around my legs. His rough purr, a simple, unconditional demand for food and attention that felt more honest and direct than anything I'd experienced in Chicago. I mechanically fed him, changed out of the awful navy suit, and sank onto my living room sofa, the springs groaning a familiar complaint. The silence was a roar. I picked up the phone and called B. It was past midnight, but she answered on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep, but immediately alert. Janet. What's wrong? What happened? No greeting, just direct concern, and I told her. The whole wretched story poured out in a chaotic, tear-choked flood, breaking through the dam of my composure, the calculated elegance of the party, the search for my name, the sight of the children's table, the balloons, the crayons, the crushing walk, the plastic chicken nuggets, and then the audacious, smiling request in the bathroom alcove for a blank check to fund a fantasy. I expected instant outrage, fiery indignation on my behalf. But first, there was a long, heavy processing silence on the other end of the line. It was the silence of someone hearing something so appalling it required a moment to settle. B. I whispered, a sob catching in my throat, thinking the call had dropped or she had fallen back asleep. I'm here, honey, she said. Finally, her voice low and serious, completely devoid of its usual wry humor. I'm just... processing the sheer unmitigated gall of that child. Another pause, and I could almost see her shaking her head in the dark of her own bedroom. Janet, listen to me. You are not an ATM. You are not a hired nanny. You are her mother, and she has forgotten what that word means. It's time you reminded her, not with a check, with a backbone. How? The word was a plea, a confession of helplessness. She's my daughter, my only family. I don't want to lose her. The fear was primal, the fear of being utterly alone. You've already lost the version of her you thought you had. B said not unkindly, but with a brutal honesty that was her trademark. What you're clinging to is a memory, a photo album. The woman at that party who treated you like hired help and then asked you to bankroll her fairy tale. That's who she is now, and the only way you might ever get a chance at having your real daughter back. The one with a heart, the one Robert and you raised, is to stand up to this polished, entitled stranger. Put your own name on the table, for God's sake. The big table. The one where adults sit. After we hung up, her words echoing in the quiet. I wandered the house like a ghost, touching familiar objects. The back of Robert's armchair, the framed photo of Clara's graduation, the china cabinet that held my mother's dishes as if to confirm they were still real. I ended up in front of my floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, my true sanctuary. My eyes, blurred with tears, scanned the familiar titles, but landed on none of them. They landed on a small, worn, leather-bound journal tucked discreetly between two large volumes of Robert Frost's poetry. Robert's journal. He'd kept it for years, jotting down ideas for the novel. He never wrote observations about the birds at the feeder, thoughts about Clara. I hadn't opened it in at least 5 years. The pain of his absence, the sound of his voice in his script had been too much. But now that pain felt secondary to the fresh, gaping wound Clara had inflicted. With trembling hands, I pulled the journal out. The leather was soft, warmed by the room. I didn't go to a chair. I just sank to the floor right there in the hallway, my back against the bookshelves, and opened it under the glow of the small hallway sconce. I didn't read it from the beginning. I had a terrible, urgent need. I flipped roughly to the back, to the entries he made in the last 6 months, when the fatigue had become a constant companion, and the doctor's smiles had grown tight. My vision swam, but I forced myself to focus. The script, once bold and flowing, had grown smaller, fainter, as if conserving energy. And then about 20 pages from the end, one paragraph seemed to lift off the page, the words glowing with a terrible, prescient clarity. It was dated just a few weeks before he died. My dearest Janet, my worry isn't for Clara. She is fierce and will carve her own path. The world will bend to her will, or she will convince herself it has. My worry is for you. You have spent so long loving us, supporting us, holding us all together with your quiet strength. You make a home wherever you are. Promise me when I'm gone, you will not just exist for her. You must not become a satellite to her son. Promise me you will build a life for yourself too, a life of your own choosing. Read the books you've postponed. See the places you've dreamed of. Say no when you need to. You must live for yourself now. Don't just be a memory in her story. Make sure your own story continues. I love you. Always. Ah. A raw, guttural sob racked my body, bending me double over the journal on my knees. He had seen it. Even then, in his own pain and diminishment, he had seen the pattern of my self-erasure, the trajectory of my life if left unchecked. He had loved me enough to be afraid for me. And in that moment on the floor of my hallway, the dam of a lifetime broke. The tears were no longer just of hurt or betrayal, but of profound, aching release and a staggering regret. The slow-burning ember of anger met the pure oxygen of his forgotten words and burst into a clear, steady, unwavering flame of resolve. This was not just about a wedding or money. This was about the rest of my life. I had broken the promise I made to him as I held his hand and watched him go. I had become Clara's satellite. It was time 7 years too late to keep my promise. It was time to become my own son. The next morning, I did not wake up feeling like a new woman. I woke up with puffy eyes, a headache from crying, and a bone-deep exhaustion that felt like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. But beneath the fatigue, there was a new sensation, a strange, cold clarity. It was the clarity that comes after a storm has passed, when the landscape, though battered, is revealed in stark, undeniable detail. I did not call Clara. I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the kitchen table. It buzzed throughout the morning, vibrating against the wood with an insect-like persistence. Each buzz was a tiny shock to my system. I let them all go to voicemail. By the afternoon, I made myself listen to them, my hand steady as I pressed play. Her messages were a timeline of escalating pressure. The first was cheerful, performative. "Hey, Mom, just checking in, hoping you got home safe. Let me know when you've had a chance to think about our talk. Love you." The second, a day later, was tinged with impatience. "Mom, it's Clara. I need an answer pretty soon. The venue coordinator is asking for a deposit. Call me back." The third, 2 days after that, was stripped of pretense, Janet. "Call me back. This is important. Today." She hadn't called me Mum. She'd used my name like a superior addressing a subordinate. Instead of calling her back, I made 3 calls of my own. They were the first strategic actions I'd taken on my own behalf in decades. First, to David Green. David had been Robert's financial advisor, golf partner, and friend. A kind, methodical man in his late 60s, he had gracefully taken me on as a client after Robert's death, treating me with a respect that was both professional and paternal. I sat in his calm, wood-panelled office overlooking the town square, and with a calm that surprised me, laid it all out. The venue, the platinum package, the request to fund it entirely. I even told him about the children's table, my voice only wavering slightly. He listened without interruption, steepling his fingers, his kind eyes serious. "Janet," he said, finally leaning forward, "your assets are healthy and well managed. You have Robert's life insurance, which you invested prudently. You have your state pension, which will provide a stable base. You have your IRA." But he emphasized, turning his monitor so I could see these assets are designed very carefully to provide you with security, comfort, and options for what could easily be another 30 years. They are not a pool of discretionary funds for a single extravagant event. He showed me charts, graphs, projections. He used terms like longevity risk and inflation-adjusted withdrawals. The numbers were abstract, but their meaning was concrete, mathematical, and unassailable. Writing a check for a wedding of that scale would not be a generous gift. It would be an act of profound financial self-sabotage, potentially requiring me to sell my home or drastically reduce my standard of living in my later years. "You would be trading your security for her spectacle," he said gently. "Robert would not have wanted that. I don't think you want that either." Second, at B's firm and insistent suggestion, I had a brief paid consultation with a lawyer named Sylvia Moore. B said she was a pit bull in a pantsuit and exactly what I needed. I wasn't suing anyone, I explained to Sylvia in her tidy, book-lined office. I just needed to know my footing to understand what I was legally and ethically obligated to do. Sylvia was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a direct manner. "You have no legal obligation to pay for an adult child's wedding," she stated plainly, as if reciting a basic fact of the universe. "None. A gift is just that, a gift given voluntarily. Given what you've described the treatment at the party, the scale of the request, I would strongly advise you to make any gift conditional and very clearly defined. A specific stated amount in writing if possible for a general purpose like toward your wedding or future. A blank check or an open-ended promise is a recipe for financial drain and bottomless resentment. She also gave me some simple, powerful advice on protecting my assets from emotional guilt trips and suggested language for setting boundaries that was clear, unemotional, and legally sound. Third, I called the community centre and signed up for a gentle yoga class for seniors that met on Tuesday mornings. I went on long, purposeful walks with B along the river trail, not talking about Clara, but about the red-tailed hawks we saw, the upcoming library book sale, the absurdity of modern television. I started practicing the word no when my assistant at the library asked me to cover her Saturday shift last minute. For the third time I smiled and said, "I'm sorry I can't this weekend. I have plans." The plans were to sit in my armchair with Hemingway, but they were my plans. When a pushy textbook salesman refused to take, "I'll consider it for an answer," I looked him in the eye and said, "The answer is no. Thank you for your time." Each no was a tiny rebellion, a muscle I hadn't used in decades, and it grew stronger, less shaky with each exercise. After 3 weeks, when the initial storm of emotion had settled into a firm, unshakable resolve, when I felt steady on my new footing, I sat down at my old oak kitchen table. The morning light streamed in. I took out a piece of my good linen stationery, a relic from another era, and my favourite fountain pen, the one Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. I wrote to my daughter. I wrote not in the heat of anger, but with a devastating, calm honesty that took me 4 drafts and most of the afternoon to achieve. I threw the early accusatory versions away. This needed to be unimpeachable. I wrote about the profound hurt of the children's table, not as a dramatic accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. It made me feel invisible and unimportant on a day that should have included me as your mother. It was deeply disrespectful. I wrote about the shock of her financial request coming on the heels of that humiliation, and how it felt less like an invitation to share her joy and more like a transaction. I acknowledged her dreams for a beautiful day, but I also stated plainly the reality of my finances, not as an excuse, but as a boundary. Then I laid out my decision with the clarity Sylvia Moore would have admired. I would not be financing her dream wedding. However, as a gesture of my love and support for her marriage to Ethan, I would gift them a sum of $5,000 to use as they saw fit, perhaps for a honeymoon, or to put towards furnishing their new home. It was a generous, significant sum from my world, the world of budgets and careful planning she so clearly disdained. Finally, I set my terms for ongoing relationship. I wrote that if I was to be a guest at her wedding, I expected to be treated as the mother of the bride, with the respect, inclusion, and consideration that role deserves. This included a seat at the family table during the reception. If that was not possible, if my presence was merely as a guest, to be placed where convenient, then with a heavy but resolute heart, I would choose not to attend. I ended the letter as I began it with love, but a love that now had a spine, a perimeter, a self. I love you, Clara. I always will. But love does not mean I allow you to treat me with disrespect or view me as a resource to be managed. I hope one day you will understand the difference. I did not email it. I printed it, signed it, placed it in a crisp white envelope, and drove to the post office. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. I needed the tangible legal proof that she had received it. I needed to know the message had landed not in her voicemail, but in her hands. The storm hit with predictable force 2 days after the delivery notification appeared in my online mailbox. My phone rang. It was Clara. I was in the library reshelving books in the history section. I stepped into the small staff break room, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my breathing steady. I answered. Her voice was a scolding torrent, a mix of furious tears and white-hot outrage. How could you? Letter. How passive-aggressive and pathetic can you be? And $5,000. Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea what anything costs? That wouldn't cover the flowers. That's an insult. It's a slap in the face. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, watching a sparrow peck at crumbs on the break room windowsill. It is not an insult, Clara. I said, my voice low and even surprising myself. It is a gift. A significant and generous one, given my means. It's a slap in the face. You're trying to ruin this for me. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of my life, of Ethan, of everything I've achieved. She screamed the accusation so ugly and unfounded it took my breath away for a second. I let the words hang in the staticky air between us. I did not rush to defend myself. I am not jealous, Clara. I am very proud of your achievements. I am setting a boundary. They are not the same thing. Boundary? What does that even mean? You're my mother. You're supposed to be there for me. That's what mothers do. The manipulation was textbook. A lifelong habit that had always worked before. The emotional guilt trip laid on thick. I am there for you. I said, the steel in my voice becoming more familiar, more natural. I am offering a substantial financial gift, and my loving presence at your wedding provided I am treated with basic respect. That is being there for you. Writing a blank check for a single day of pageantry a day, on which I am not even granted a seat among the adults, is not support. It is capitulation. And I won't do it. There was a sputtering, inarticulate sound of rage. Then the line went dead, with a final, violent click. She had hung up on me. I leaned against the counter, my legs shaky, but a strange, defiant energy coursing through me. I had said the words. I had held the line. The second assault came about an hour later as I was driving home. A new number flashed on my car's Bluetooth screen. I had a feeling I knew who it was. I answered. Hello, Janet Ethan here. His voice was calm, smooth, dripping with the condescending reasonableness of someone used to negotiating deals and handling difficult people. Look, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Clara's understandably upset. This wedding is very important to her, to us. It's a reflection of our future together. Perhaps we can discuss a more reasonable contribution. A figure that better reflects your role as her mother and the scale of the event. I kept my eyes on the road. The familiar streets of Cedar Falls, a comforting anchor. My role as her mother is not defined by a dollar figure, Ethan. I replied, my tone matching his calm, but devoid of its condescension. It is defined by a lifetime of love and care which is not up for negotiation. My offer stands. $5,000 as a gift and my respectful presence at the wedding. Those are my terms. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation meant to convey how tiresome and unreasonable I was being. Janet, be realistic. This is about family, about stepping up. I would think for your only daughter you'd want to make this sacrifice. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The word sacrifice ignited something in me. I have been stepping up for 32 years, Ethan. I interrupted, a new cold steel in my voice that felt like it came from somewhere deep and previously untapped. I stepped up when her father died. I stepped up through college tuition, through first apartments, through every crisis and celebration. This is what stepping up looks like for me now, ensuring I am not financially gutted and emotionally disrespected in my later years. The discussion about the money is closed, a beat of stunned silence. He was not used to being spoken to so directly, especially not by a small-town librarian he viewed as a mild obstacle. He muttered a curt, "Fine, we'll manage," and ended the call. The final formal volley came via email a week later, late on a Friday evening. It was terse, written in cold professional language that I knew was Ethan's doing. It stated that given my unwillingness to participate as family in the traditional sense, they would be proceeding with their wedding plans without my financial or logistical involvement. I was welcome to attend as a guest, but due to firmly finalized seating charts and venue constraints, my placement could not be guaranteed to be at the immediate family table. It was a transparent, almost laughably blatant attempt to force a last-minute capitulation to dangle the possibility of a seat at the adult table as a reward for compliance. I sat at my kitchen table, Hemingway in my lap, and read the email 3 times. The pain was a sharp, clean cut, a surgical severing. This was it. The choice was made, and it was not mine. She was choosing the platinum package, the fireworks, the exclusive venue, and Ethan's version of family over me. She was choosing the illusion of a perfect day over the messy, real, and demanding reality of a relationship with her mother. A profound stillness settled over me. I wrote back a single, unadorned line, just as Sylvia Moore had advised. "Thank you for the invitation. I will not be attending. I wish you a beautiful day." I hovered the cursor over the send button for a full minute, feeling the weight of the moment, the closing of a door. Then I clicked it. In the profound silence that followed, a remarkable thing happened. The crushing, ever-present weight of anxiety, the worry about disappointing her, the fear of her anger, the twisting need for her approval that had lived in my chest for decades, began to dissolve. It was replaced by a deep, aching sorrow for the daughter I had lost and the relationship that had died, but also by a new, unfamiliar, and solid sense of integrity. I had chosen myself. I had honored the promise to Robert. I had spoken my truth and held my ground. And while it hurt more than I could have possibly imagined, the pain was clean. It was the pain of truth, not the sick, hollow ache of complicity in my own diminishment. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like an adult. I felt like Janet. The first few months were the hardest. The silence from Chicago was not mere absence. It was a physical presence in my house, a heavy, echoing quiet where Clara's calls and demands used to be. Thanksgiving, which I had always spent cooking for her, and whichever friend or boyfriend she brought home, arrived. B literally showed up on my doorstep with a pecan pie. "You're coming to my place. My grandkids are loud. My son-in-law burns the turkey and we watch football too loud. You'll hate it. It's perfect." I went. I cried in the downstairs bathroom, twice overwhelmed by the noise and the foreign sense of belonging to a different family. But I also laughed until my sides hurt at one of B's grandson's ridiculous jokes. And I helped a 5-year-old named Lily make a hand turkey, drawing her small, sticky hand in mine. I joined the new mystery book club at the library, not as the facilitator who prepared the questions, but as a participant. It was terrifying at first to offer an opinion without the shield of authority. I discovered a passionate love for gritty Scandinavian noir that surprised everyone, including me. The women in the club, a mix of retirees and younger teachers, became a new source of connection. We talked about plots and character motivation, and sometimes over coffee, after our lives would slip in around the edges of the literary discussion. And I did something radical, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. With the money I had not spent on a lakefront fireworks display or 12-piece band, I called a travel agent named Maureen. With a voice that shook only slightly, I told her about a dream long buried under layers of duty and economy of visiting Ireland. My grandmother was from a village near Cork, and she had filled my childhood with stories of green so deep it hurt your eyes, of misty ruins, and of poets in pubs. I told Maureen I wanted to see the Book of Kells at Trinity College. "Ah," a reader, she'd exclaimed. I've got the perfect itinerary for you. In the spring, when the Iowa mud was just receding, I went. For 16 days, I traveled alone. I walked the windswept cliffs of Moher, the ocean roaring hundreds of feet below, and felt exhilaratingly small. I toured the stunning long-room library, its barrel-vaulted ceiling and scent of ancient leather and wood, making me weep quietly with a sense of homecoming I hadn't expected. I drank tea in tiny, steamy shops in Kinsale, and struck up conversations with elderly locals who reminded me of my grandmother. I got lost on a narrow country road and had to ask for directions from a farmer on a tractor who grinned and said, "You're not lost, love. You're just having an adventure." I thought of Robert constantly, but not with paralyzing grief. I felt with a certainty that warmed me from within that I was finally truly keeping my promise to him. I was living. I was having an adventure. Back home, I turned my attention to my own space, my own corner of the world. I hired a kind, capable teenage boy from down the street to help me build 3 raised garden beds in my sunniest backyard patch. We filled them with rich soil. I planted lavender for its calm scent, climbing roses for their defiant beauty, and herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary for the practical joy of cooking with something I'd grown. I bought a beautiful, weather-resistant wicker armchair and a small mosaic-topped table at a flea market. I placed them under the dappled shade of my old oak tree, creating my own private reading nook. It became my sanctuary, my big table for one, where I would drink my morning coffee and listen to the birds or spend summer evenings with a novel as the fireflies emerged. I learned slowly and painfully that healing is not a straight line, it is a spiral. Some days I would be doing perfectly fine, and then a grief would ambush me with the ferocity of a summer storm. Hearing a mother and daughter laughing together over coffee at the diner, finding an old crumpled picture of Clara as a gap-toothed 7-year-old stuck in a cookbook. The simple question from a well-meaning patron, "How's that daughter of yours in Chicago?" But the sharp, debilitating pain of those moments gradually dulled into a persistent, manageable ache, like an old fracture that warns you when the weather changes. It was a scar, and scars are records of survival. One afternoon, almost a year to the day after the engagement party that had shattered my old life, I was in my garden. The lavender was in full, fragrant bloom, buzzing with bees. I was pruning spent rose heads, my hands stained with earth. My suitcase lay open on my bed, inside half-packed for a long weekend trip to Madison to visit an old college friend I hadn't seen in 20 years. My phone sitting on the mosaic table next to a glass of iced tea rang. The screen said, "Clara." My breath caught in my throat. The old instinctive maternal hope flared bright, painful, and immediate. But it was instantly tempered, surrounded by a year's worth of hard-won self-protection and hard-earned peace. I let it ring 3 times, watching a bumblebee dive drunkenly into a foxglove blossom. I watched my own hand, tanned from gardening, as it reached out and picked up the phone. I answered. "Hello, Mum." Her voice was different, thinner, younger sounding, tired. Not a trace of the brittle, performative cheer or the sharp, entitled anger. It just sounded sad, deflated, human. "Yes, Clara, it's me." A long pause. I could hear her breathing a little shaky. I could hear city traffic in the distance a world away. The wedding. It was last month. Another pause, heavy with unspoken words, with the ghost of the event that had cost us our relationship. It was big. Everything I wanted. The fireworks, they were supposed to be over the lake, but there was a fog bank, so you could only see the colors in the mist. It was weird. The sentence ended not with triumph or satisfaction, but with a hollow, confused note. It wasn't what I thought it would be. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't mention money. She didn't blame or cajole. She just said the words, sounding rusty. I've been thinking about a lot of things, about before. I looked at my garden, at the life I had nurtured from barren soil, with my own hands. I felt the warm sun on the back of my neck, the solid, familiar ground beneath my gardening clogs. I thought of my upcoming trip of the new friends in my book club, waiting for my take on the latest mystery of the quiet, contented peace of my evenings with Hemingway, purring on the arm of my chair. The life I had rebuilt was not perfect. It was not grand or sophisticated, but it was mine. It was honest. It was real. I'm about to leave town for a few days, I said, my voice calm. My own, without edge or expectation. When I get back, if you would like to have a real conversation, you are welcome to come here. We can sit in the garden and have some tea. The silence on the other end was filled with the enormity of the shift. The power was no longer in her hands, in her demands, in her venue choices. It was in my quiet, open-handed invitation issued on my terms at my table, the one under the oak tree, where the only place card needed was my own presence. She whispered, and I heard a muffled sound that might have been a sob. I'd like that. Good, I said softly. Safe travels in the meantime. And I ended the call. I placed the phone down on the mosaic table. It sat there silent again. I picked up my pruning shears. The metal was warm from the sun. My hands, with their new calluses from gardening and their old ones from a lifetime of turning pages, were steady. The story wasn't over. Perhaps a new, more honest, more difficult chapter was just beginning, one word at a time. Or perhaps this was just a single, fragile sentence. But for the first time, I knew with a bone-deep certainty that I would be okay either way. The greatest gift I ever gave myself wasn't a trip to Ireland or a garden in bloom. It was the courage to finally, at 58, stop reading about other people's lives and write myself boldly and unapologetically back into the center of my own. What about you? Have you ever reached a point where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? What did that crossroads look like for you? And how did you find the strength to take that first terrifying step onto a new path? I would be so grateful if you shared a piece of your own story in the comments below. If this journey of mine resonated with you, please give this video a like. It lets me know that these shared experiences of learning to stand up for ourselves, no matter our age, truly matter. And if you'd like to join me for more conversations about finding our voice and building a life of authenticity later in life, please consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. Remember, your seat at the table is yours to claim. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.